All right. The ESPN every single year goes through right before training camp starts, and they go through every position on the field, and they talk to executives, coaches, scouts, and they compile a list of the top 10 players at every position on the field. And they started with running backs yesterday. They did defensive tackle today. The Saints did not have a defensive tackle that was even listed, and that's not a super surprising thing. I think Brian Brzee is a nice player, but I don't think that he was going to be a top 10 player in the league at this point. But the question that I had when I saw the list were coming out, I was like, okay, Kamara had a pretty good year last year. I mean, Alvin Kamara last year ran for a career-high 950 yards. His previous high was 932 back in the COVID year of 2020. And I think Kamara could have potentially run for 1,000 this past year if they wanted to do that. If they wanted to push the envelope and get those last 50 yards late in the season, they probably could have. But no use in doing that because the season was pretty well cashed at that point. And before you say, well, he ran for 950, but it's a 17-game season. Well, Kamara missed 3 games last year when he was trying to run through broken ribs at one point. And finally, they said, okay, you need to take a seat for a little bit. And he did. But he ran for 950 yards in just 14 games last year. So I'm going, okay, I know he's going to his age 30 season, but is he a top 10 running back in the league? And so it starts where you know it's going to start with Saquon Barkley. Derrick Henry still at number 2 at age 31. Jahmyr Gibbs has ascended up to number 3 at this point for a great Detroit team. Then you've got Bijan Robinson in the Saints division at number 4 with Atlanta. Christian McCaffrey slipped a little bit. Obviously dealt with a lot of injuries last year. So he's number 5. Josh Jacobs, number 6 for Green Bay. Jonathan Taylor, number 7. So you're running out of time for Kamara here. James Cook with Buffalo, age 25 season, is number 8 on the list. Joe Mixon from the Houston Texans is number 9 on the list. And Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints is number 10 on the list after not being ranked last year. A premier back in our rankings for years, Kamara fell to honorable mention last year after a few down seasons, though some evaluators see a slight decline. Kamara fought his way back to the top 10 thanks to 1,500 scrimmage yards last year. He appeared on nearly 60% of the voting ballots, but none in the top 6. The quote from an NFL offensive coach said, some of the elite traits are still there. He didn't have much of an offensive line or a supporting cast last year, but he can still take a screen for big yardage and still has great contact balance. And I think that's the thing with Kamara that has endured throughout his 20s. You're always going to potentially lose a step as you get to this point in your career. Maybe not be quite as elusive, not as shifty as you were when you were 23, 24 years old. But what Kamara has maintained to me is the ability to stay balanced, whether that's taking a hit, whether that's on a cut where he gets bumped, whether that's the patience that he shows in the open field to allow his blockers to go and then his stop and start change of direction. The balance to me is what has separated him and has maintained throughout his time as a New Orleans Saints running back. And so I think it's reasonable to suggest he's a top 10 back in the sport. You're looking at a guy who doesn't, who has never been, I mentioned a 1,000-yard back, but has been such a vital catch-and-run player in his career. I mean, look at some of these yardage totals, and I realize that I'm going back to his rookie year for this, but 826 yards receiving when he was the AP Rookie of the Year in 2017. And then 709 in 2018, and then 756 in 2020. And even the last couple of years, which he's missed a little bit of time, and those say he's taken a step back, 490 receiving yards 3 years ago, 466 2 years ago, and then this past season, he caught 68 balls for 543 yards. That's 8 yards per catch for Alvin Kamara. And I think the discussion with Kamara, and we had it all of the early season last year with would you pay him, would you not? I would not have. And it has nothing to do with Alvin Kamara as a player or as a professional. It has everything to do with where the Saints are and with what his age is. But they already made that decision. So that's not for debate anymore. He's back. 2-year deal. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to get a reliable player who's generally on the field. He's missed more time over the last 5 years than he did early, but he's generally on the field. He's tough as nails. He's a true pro. He wants to be in New Orleans. He can still catch the ball and run with it. And now it's less about him competing for, Offensive Player of the Year, him being a top 10 running back, him getting 1,000 yards, him helping the Saints win the Super Bowl, which it was in his early years. It's more about him teaching these young running backs, whether that's Kendre Miller or Devin Neal, and helping Tyler Shough, a new quarterback, ease into his role as the number one signal caller. That's with running the ball. That's with pass protection. That's with being an emergency valve out of the backfield that Shough can feel comfortable checking it down to and can still produce once he gets those opportunities. And I think he is a quality guy to have in that spot for that role. This is a guy that made 5 straight Pro Bowls to start his career. He was the Offensive Rookie of the Year, Pro Bowl, then was a second-team AP All-Pro in 2020, and he made a Pro Bowl in 2021. He has not the last 3 years, but he's still productive. He's still a great teammate, and he's a guy you want in the locker room. I just may not have extended to that point. And the question I was asking myself today is, okay, where does Kamara rank in the modern era of the Saints, the last 25 years? Say this quarter century. You're seeing a lot of quarter century lists being, tossed out there. And I would not put Kamara in Drew Brees category. And like Jari Evans, as far as accomplishments, is more accomplished than Alvin Kamara. Cam Jordan has been tremendous and is likely a Hall of Fame player, which I don't think at this point Kamara is. And then you've got this group of guys, whether it's Michael Thomas for the crazy start he had to his career, Demario Davis for the incredible productivity and longevity, Marcus Colston for being the best receiver productivity-wise in the Saints' history, Terran Armstead, Ryan Ramczyk, Carl Nix, Jonathan Vilma. That's the company that Kamara keeps. And I think if you start to chop it up, he's somewhere, 5 to 9 of the best Saints in this golden era of the last 25 years. And I realize the golden era only goes 20 years, but I think it's a round number if you can cut it off at 2000. That doesn't include Willie Roaf, and it doesn't include Ricky Jackson, it doesn't include Morton Anderson, doesn't include Archie Manning. But in this era of Saints football, the last 25 years, he's a top 5 or 6 player, and I think he's the greatest running back in the history of the franchise. Now, Mark Ingram's going to have more yards, and Deuce is beloved for good reason in New Orleans, but me watching Kamara, and maybe it's just because it was the perfect offense for him, where it was not necessarily a ground and pound offense like Deuce was in, and he had help from Ingram, who was running between the tackles, and he was just the guy making the flashy plays on the perimeter, and maybe that skewed my opinion a little bit, but I just found him to be an exceptionally versatile and productive back, and one that I would love to take. Maybe you don't take it if you're trying to run the old Cowboys offense with Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman and just the best offensive line and pound it forward. But if you're talking about the Saints who were spreading the field, who were creating some space, who had a quarterback that was very, very willing to check it down in Drew Brees, who knew he was going to get 6 yards for sure and maybe 60 from Kamara, that's a valuable dude to have. And it was a perfect fit at the perfect time. And I think that his career in New Orleans is going to be remembered very, 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 very fondly when that comes to an end, probably in 2 more years. But it's a different role for him now for the next 2 years. It's not try to win Offensive Player of the Year. It's, okay, be a mentor, be productive, but be a comfort blanket for Tyler Shough as he eases into his role as the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. So very cool that Alvin Kamara is still thought of in league circles as a top 10 back in the league. You're going to need him to be that with the money that you're paying him. And there are people that think he certainly can be. So Alvin Kamara thought of as the number 10 running back in the National Football League by the folks that ESPN.com spoke with. I don't disagree with that. Hey, it's on. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.